Have you ever looked at a place you hated and realized it was the only place you ever felt whole? I spent 10 years running away from the dirt roads and the judgmental whispers of Oakhaven. I traded the scent of pine for the smell of expensive espresso and diesel fumes in Manhattan. I thought I had made it. But when life breaks you, it doesn't care how many skyscrapers you've built. It only cares about where you can go to heal. Welcome back to Gay Stories Chronicles. Today's story is for anyone who ever felt like an outsider in their own home, and for anyone who found love in the one place they promised never to return. The silver Porsche didn't belong in Oakhaven. It looked like a surgical instrument dropped into a dusty toolbox. I could feel the stares of the men at the gas station. Men I probably went to high school with. Men whose names I had scrubbed from my memory like a bad stain. My name is Silas. 6 months ago, I was one of the top architectural consultants in New York. 6 weeks ago, my firm collapsed, my partner cleaned out our joint account, and my doctor told me that the panic attacks were actually my body's way of telling me I was dying from stress. So I did the only thing I could. I came back to the old sagging Victorian house my grandfather left me, the one at the end of a long, winding driveway where the trees seemed to lean in as if they were trying to keep the house's secrets buried. "He's back," I heard someone mutter as I filled my tank. I didn't look up. I just stared at the mountain range in the distance, the peaks still capped with the last of the winter snow. The house was worse than I remembered. The porch groaned under my weight, and the ivy had climbed so high it was choking the windows. But as I turned the key in the heavy oak door, the smell hit me. Old paper, cedar, and wood smoke. It smelled like my childhood. It smelled like the only time I ever felt safe. "Need a hand with that?" I jumped, dropping my keys. Standing at the bottom of the porch steps was a man who looked like he had been carved out of the mountain itself. He was wearing faded denim, a flannel shirt with the sleeves rolled up to his elbows, and boots that had seen more miles than my car ever would. He was thick-shouldered, with a jawline covered in a neat salt and pepper beard, and eyes the color of a stormy lake. "I'm Caleb," he said, his voice a low rumble that seemed to vibrate in my chest. "I've been keeping an eye on the place for your lawyer. Figured you'd show up eventually." "Silas," I managed to say, my heart doing a strange little flip that had nothing to do with a panic attack. "I know who you are, Silas," he said, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. "You're the boy who left. I'm the one who stayed." That first week was a blur of dust and memories. I spent my days tearing down rotting wallpaper and my nights staring at the ceiling, listening to the house breathe. Oakhaven was quiet, too quiet. It forced me to think. It forced me to remember why I left. I was 19 when I ran. I was the artistic kid in a town that valued calloused hands and high school football. I was the kid who looked at other boys a little too long, the kid whose father tried to fix him with long silences and hard work. Caleb started showing up every morning at 8 a.m. He didn't ask permission. He just started fixing the things I didn't know how to fix. He replaced the porch boards. He unclogged the gutters. He shored up the sagging roof of the tool shed. "You don't have to do this," I said one afternoon, bringing him a glass of iced tea. The sun was beating down, and a bead of sweat was trickling down his neck, disappearing into the dark hair of his chest. Caleb took the glass, his fingers brushing mine. His skin was rough, warm, and sent a jolt of electricity straight up my arm. He took a long drink, his Adam's apple bobbing. "House like this needs a man who knows its bones," he said, wiping his mouth. "You're an architect, Silas. You designed things on paper. I'm a carpenter. I deal with the reality of the wood." "And what's the reality of this house?" I asked, leaning against the railing, feeling the small-town heat wrap around us like a blanket. Caleb looked at me, his gaze intense, unblinking. "It's been waiting for you to decide if you're staying or just visiting. Wood can tell the difference." "I don't know yet," I whispered. "I do," Caleb said. He stepped closer, so close I could smell the sawdust and the clean, honest scent of a man who worked outdoors. "You've got Oakhaven dust in your blood, Silas. You can try to wash it off in the city, but it never really goes away." Over the next month, the silence between us changed. It wasn't the awkward silence of strangers. It was the heavy, charged silence of two people who were carefully stepping around an invisible line. We worked together. I started helping him sand the floors. We'd spend hours in the same room, the only sound the rhythmic shh of the sandpaper. Sometimes our eyes would meet, and the air would suddenly feel too thick to breathe. Caleb was a man of few words, but he spoke through his actions. He'd bring me extra coffee. He'd fix the creaky door to my bedroom without me asking. One evening, when a thunderstorm knocked out the power, he stayed. We sat on the kitchen floor, a single candle between us. The rain was drumming against the tin roof, creating a private world just for the two of us. "Why did you stay, Caleb?" I asked, the candlelight dancing in his dark eyes. "A man like you could have gone anywhere." Caleb leaned back against the cabinets, his large frame taking up so much space in the small kitchen. "My mother was sick for a long time. By the time she passed, I realized I liked the quiet. I liked knowing everyone's name. And," he hesitated, his voice dropping an octave, "I was waiting for something." "For what?" Caleb reached out, his hand hovering over mine for a second before he pulled back. "For something worth building a life around." The tension was so sharp I felt like I was breaking. I wanted him to reach out again. I wanted to tell him that my life in New York was a lie, that I was empty until I saw him standing on my porch. But I was terrified. If I stayed, I had to face the town. If I stayed, I had to be the man I was always meant to be. "I'm scared, Caleb," I whispered. "I know," he said, his voice like velvet in the dark. "But the thing about old houses, Silas, is that you have to strip away the rot before you can see the beauty of the grain. You're doing the work. Don't stop now." Oakhaven had a way of watching you without ever looking you in the eye. By the third week of July, the town's curiosity had shifted from silent stares to whispered questions. Every time I went into the general store for more wood glue or a gallon of milk, Mrs. Gable would linger at the register, her eyes darting to the mud on my boots. "Caleb Thorne's been spending a lot of time out at that old place," she said one morning, her voice as thin as the paper she was wrapping my bread in. "He's a good man, Caleb. Steady. A bit of a loner since his folks passed, but steady." "He's helping me with the structural repairs," I replied, keeping my voice neutral. "Structural repairs," she repeated, a knowing glint in her eyes. "Is that what they're calling it these days?" I walked out of the store with my heart hammering. It was happening again, the feeling of being a specimen under a microscope. Back in Manhattan, I was invisible, a face in a crowd of millions. Here, I was a headline on a page no one ever turned.
When I got back to the house, Caleb was already there. He was up on a ladder, his back to me, the muscles of his shoulders rippling as he hammered a loose shingle. He looked like he belonged to the landscape, a permanent fixture of the mountain. I stood at the bottom of the ladder, watching him. I felt a sudden, sharp pang of jealousy. He was so comfortable in his own skin, so settled in a place that made me feel like I was walking on eggshells.
"You're late," Caleb called out, not turning around. "Met the town welcoming committee at the store," I sighed, setting the groceries on the porch. "Mrs. Gable. She had a lot to say about you." Caleb climbed down, his movements slow and deliberate. He pulled a rag from his back pocket and wiped the dust from his hands. "Let me guess. She said I was steady, like a mule or an old tractor." "Something like that." Caleb stepped closer, his shadow falling over me. The smell of cedar and sweat was stronger today, intoxicating. People in this town talk because their lives are as quiet as the woods. They don't mean anything by it, Silas. They're just trying to see if you're going to run again. "Are you?" I asked, the words out before I could stop them. "Are you waiting to see if I run?" The hammer in Caleb's hand dangled by his side. He looked at me for a long time, his gray eyes searching mine. "I'm not waiting for you to run, Silas. I'm waiting for you to exhale." Before I could ask what he meant, he turned and walked toward the kitchen. "Come on, the subflooring in the parlor is dry. We've got work to do."
The Oakhaven Founders Day Festival was the one event of the year you couldn't skip without being declared a social pariah. It was a sea of hay bales, string lights, and the smell of frying dough. I didn't want to go. I wanted to stay in the dark safety of my grandfather's house, but Caleb had insisted. "You can't hide in a house you're trying to fix," he'd said, looking surprisingly handsome in a clean black button-down shirt that stretched across his chest. The festival was a blur of faces from my past. Men who had teased me in the locker room now had toddlers on their shoulders. Girls I had awkward slow dances with were now running the bake sale booths. I felt like a ghost walking through a life I was supposed to have. We were standing near the edge of the dance floor, under the shadow of a massive oak tree, when the music slowed down. A local country band started playing a soft, acoustic ballad, something about home and the people who wait for you. "Dance with me," Caleb said. I looked at him, my eyes wide. "Caleb, we're in the middle of the town square. We can't." "Why not?" "Because," I gestured vaguely at the crowd, "because they'll see. Because this is Oakhaven. Because I'm already the guy who left. I don't want to be the guy who—" "The guy who what?" Caleb interrupted, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous rumble. "The guy who loves a man? The guy who finally stopped caring what Mrs. Gable thinks?" He reached out and took my hand. His palm was huge, calloused, and felt like the safest place on earth. "They already know, Silas," he whispered. "They've known since the day I started showing up at your house at 8 a.m. every morning. The only one who hasn't accepted it yet is you." He led me out onto the grass, away from the center of the dance floor, but still very much in view. He put one hand on my waist, the other holding mine. We didn't dance like the other couples. We didn't sway or twirl. We just stood there, anchored to each other, moving slowly to the rhythm of the guitar. I rested my forehead against his shoulder. For the first time in 10 years, the noise in my head stopped. The panic, the pressure of the city, the fear of the future, it all went quiet. "I'm not going back, Caleb," I whispered into his shirt. He felt his hand tighten on my waist, pulling me a fraction of an inch closer. "I know," he said. "The house told me." We left the festival early. The air had turned heavy and electric, a summer storm rolling in over the peaks. By the time we reached the driveway, the sky was a bruised purple, torn apart by flashes of white lightning. We barely made it inside before the clouds broke. The rain slammed against the Victorian's roof like 1,000 hammers. Inside, the house was dark, the power flickering and finally dying. I went to the kitchen to find the candles, but Caleb caught my arm in the hallway. In the flash of lightning, his face was a study in shadows and light. He looked raw. He looked like a man who had reached the end of his patience. "Silas," he breathed. I didn't wait for him to say anything else. I reached up, my hands trembling, and cupped his face. His beard was scratchy against my palms, his skin hot. I pulled him down, and finally, the slow burn turned into a wildfire. The kiss was desperate. It tasted like rain and salt and years of loneliness. He backed me against the wall, his large body pinning me there, his hands wandering into my hair, holding me like I was something precious he was afraid of breaking. "I've wanted to do that since the day you got out of that silver car," he groaned against my neck.
"Why didn't you?" I gasped, my fingers fumbling with the buttons of his shirt. "Because I needed to know you were staying for the right reasons," he said, lifting me up so my legs wrapped around his waist. "I didn't want to be your escape, Silas. I wanted to be your home." As the thunder shook the house, I realized that the architect in me was wrong. You don't build a home with wood and nails. You build it with the courage to be seen and the strength to hold on when the storm finally hits. The morning after the storm, Oakhaven felt different. The air was scrubbed clean, the scent of wet pine and earth so strong it felt like I could taste it. I woke up in the master bedroom, the one I had spent sanding and painting, to the sound of a saw whirring downstairs. I walked down barefoot and wearing one of Caleb's oversized flannels to find him in the parlor. The sunlight was streaming through the windows we had cleaned together, hitting the dust motes like tiny shards of gold. Caleb stopped the saw when he saw me. He didn't say anything at first. He just leaned against the workbench, his eyes warm, tracing the way his shirt hung off my frame. "You look like you belong here," he said softly. I leaned against the doorframe, feeling a peace I hadn't known since I was a child. I think I finally feel like I do. But the peace didn't last. By noon, a black town car, entirely sleet for our gravel driveway, pulled up to the house. Out stepped Marcus, my former partner from Manhattan. He looked like a high-definition ghost in a sepia-toned world. "Silas," Marcus said, looking up at the Victorian with a sneer. "So this is the healing retreat. It looks like a set from a horror movie."
Caleb stepped out onto the porch, his presence immediately making Marcus look small. Caleb didn't say a word. He just stood there with his arms crossed, a mountain of a man guarding his territory. "What are you doing here, Marcus?" I asked, stepping down to meet him. "The firm," Marcus said, his voice urgent. "The collapse wasn't as bad as we thought. Investors are back. I've secured a project in Dubai, the kind of project we dreamed about in grad school. I need your eyes, Silas. I need your signature. We can be back in New York by midnight." I looked at the car. It represented everything I used to want: prestige, money, and the thrill of the skyline. Then I looked at Caleb. He was watching me, his expression unreadable, but I saw the slight tension in his jaw. He wasn't going to beg me to stay. He was going to let me choose. "The project is worth millions, Silas," Marcus pushed. "Don't tell me you're going to throw your career away for wood glue and a porch." I looked at the house. I saw the boards Caleb and I had replaced. I saw the garden we had cleared. I felt the weight of Caleb's hand on my waist from the night before. "I'm not throwing anything away, Marcus," I said, my voice steady for the first time in years.
I'm finally building something that's actually meant to last. I'm staying." Marcus looked at me like I had lost my mind. He looked at Caleb, then back at me. "You'll be bored in a month." "In a month," I replied, "I'll be sitting on that porch with a man who knows my name, not just my billable hours. Get off my property." After Marcus's car disappeared down the driveway, the silence returned, but it was heavier now. Caleb was still on the porch. He didn't look at me as I walked up the steps. "You should have gone," he said, his voice a low vibration. "That was your life." "No," I said, stepping into his space, forcing him to look at me. "That was a cage. This is my life. I want to open my own firm here, Caleb. Not for skyscrapers, but for homes, for people who want to build something real." Caleb finally looked at me, and I saw the fear he had been hiding, the fear that he wasn't enough to keep me. "You're sure? Oakhaven is small, Silas. It's always going to be small." "I don't need the world to be big," I whispered, reaching up to thread my fingers through his beard. "I just need it to have you in it." Caleb let out a breath that sounded like a prayer. He wrapped his arms around me, lifting me off the ground, spinning me once as the sun began to dip behind the mountains. I stood in my new office, the attic room with the best view of the valley. My drafting table was covered in blueprints, but they weren't for glass towers. They were for the new community center and for a small cottage down the road for a young couple starting out. I heard the heavy boots on the stairs before I saw him. Caleb came in carrying 2 mugs of coffee, the steam rising in the cool autumn air. He had sawdust in his hair and a smudge of grease on his cheek. To me, he was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. He set the coffee down and stood behind me, wrapping his arms around my chest, resting his chin on my shoulder. We looked out at Oakhaven together. The town was the same, but we were different. "The roof is finished," Caleb murmured into my ear. "The house is solid. What's next, architect?" I leaned back against him, feeling the steady beat of his heart against my spine. "Next? I think we just live in it, Caleb. I think we just stay." He kissed my temple, his hand finding mine and squeezing. In the quiet of the small town, under the shadow of the mountains, I finally realized that an architect's job isn't to build a house. It's to find the person who makes that house a home. And so, Silas found that the most important thing he ever designed was a life he didn't want to run away from. Sometimes the slow burn is the only way to melt a heart that's been frozen by the city. Thank you for joining us for this Chronicle of Oakhaven. If Silas and Caleb's journey touched your heart, please let us know in the comments below. What would you give up for a love that feels like home? If you want more stories of connection, heart, and the beauty of finding your place, please hit the like button. It helps our community grow. Don't forget to subscribe to Gay Stories Chronicles and hit the bell icon so you never miss a new chapter. We have so many more stories to tell, and we're glad you're part of this one. Until next time, keep building your own story.